Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's Multi-State ISAC National Webcast, which focuses on the topic of the expanding attack surface. We have a great turnout today with over 700 registrants for today's event. As a few reminders for today's webcast, if you would like to use the full screen mode of through the WebEx, feel free to use the two arrows in the upper right-hand corner of your screen to make your screen the full screen view. And also to ask a question, please feel free to use the Q&A feature on the right-hand side of your WebEx. And feel free to send your questions to all panelists, and we'll go ahead and get those answered for you. As some background for today's webcast, organizations of all sizes from all sectors must come to terms with growing numbers of reachable and exploitable vulnerabilities. Embracing the public cloud, mobile, and DevOps leads to an expanding attack surface that challenges our existing approaches to managing threats and vulnerabilities. Some topics that will be covered on today's event will include how the attack surface is expanding and challenging your current InfoSec practices. Does a growing attack surface change the way we view threats? Ideas for strengthening vulnerability and threat management. And at the end of the presentation, we'll have answers to your questions during the live Q&A. Our speaker today is Chris Thomas, who is a strategist with Tenable Network Security. With more than 2 decades of experience, Chris commands an uncanny ability to link disparate events, read between the lines, and distill complex technical information into readily understandable, accessible, and actionable intelligence. Before joining Tenable, he produced the Spider Labs Radio Weekly News podcast and served as editor for the Hacker News Network. In his current position at Tenable as a strategist, Chris helps clients understand how to apply the unique advantages of continuous monitoring, as well as how to meet compliance and security challenges. With all of that being said, we will turn things over to Chris now. Chris, thank you so much for being a presenter on today's webcast.
Thank you very much for having me. As my bio was just read, I won't get into this too much. A couple of points that I'll touch on that weren't in the official bio. I was a member of Loft Heavy Industries, which some of you may have heard of. I've testified in front of Congress. And as the bio did say, I am currently a strategist for Tenable. You can find me on Twitter as Space Rogue, which is a name I have used online now for a very long time. And so if you want to follow me on Twitter, you can, or if you need to send me an email afterwards and ask me a question directly, feel free to do so. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to talk about today, today's agenda. We're doing the introduction now. We're going to have a poll question. We actually have 2 poll questions during the presentation today. And we're going to talk about how the attack surface is expanding and then what you can do about it with regards to vulnerability management and how cloud-based vulnerability management can assist you with that. And then we'll wrap up at the end with a conclusion and, of course, as mentioned, the live Q&A. So let's start with a quote. The key to successfully attacking a network is to know it better than the people who designed it and the people who are securing it. Conversely, the key to defense is to know your own networks better than your adversaries. Now, I didn't read that because I didn't think you could read. Obviously, you can. I wanted to read it out loud to emphasize what the quote says. Basically, this is the old Greek proverb, know thyself. This is a problem that many organizations have. They don't really know what's on their networks, or they think they know, but they don't really, and they usually don't know in real time. So one of the first things an attacker does when they gain access to a network is to map it out. Right? That's the only way the attacker can find out where the weak points are and where the crown jewels are. That's why network administrators need to do the same thing. You cannot secure what you don't know. All right, another quick quote. As more organizations embrace public cloud, mobile, and DevOps, the fundamental concept of an asset changes and significantly impacts how security teams interact with their colleagues and do their jobs. The traditional approach of scanning a network is no longer effective because the flux of assets prohibits security teams from gaining an accurate snapshot of their environment. Now, this is kind of a short quote, but there's a lot of stuff in here that's really kind of important. The fundamental concept of an asset has changed significantly, right? That is a key phrase out of this quote. Traditional approach of scanning a network is no longer effective. It's another key phrase, right? So when it comes to mapping your network, most people kind of rely on some sort of scanning technology to automate the process. I mean, nobody walks around from cubicle to cubicle writing down MAC addresses on pieces of paper anymore like we did back in my day. But the problem is that most scanning technologies only find endpoints, and only if they're turned on. They miss things like virtual machines or containers or other newish type technologies. But before we get into those newer technologies and the expanding attack surface, I would love to get some feedback from you guys, all right, from folks in the audience. How much visibility do you think you have in your own networks? And if I can click the right buttons, there we go. I would like you to think about your attack surface, all right? And if you should have a pop-up on your window right now with various answers that you can select. I would like you to rate your confidence that you have complete visibility of all the assets on your network. Are you 100% confident? Are you sure that you know of everything that's on there? Even that hidden Windows XP box is back in the corner in the closet somewhere that nobody told you about. Do you see that on your network? All right. Or are you not confident at all? You know, and you're like, I have no idea what's on my network. Most organizations fall somewhere in between, and I would like to see where we are with this particular audience as to how confident that you have complete visibility of all the assets on your network. And of course, if it doesn't apply to your job role, feel free to hit the NA answer if it doesn't apply to you. All right, the poll has ended. I hope everybody got a chance to answer, and I should have some answers here to share with you, but I'm not seeing them. Okay, well, hopefully we'll get those soon, and we'll have those answers for you, and we take a look at how much confidence people have in the visibility of their network. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide and how the attack surface is expanding. As we wait for those poll results, we'll keep moving on. The attack surface, it's a concept that indicates the total sum of all the ways an organization can be attacked. It's kind of like a balloon that can expand and contract with the introduction and remediation of new vulnerabilities. Time is very important here because the attack surface grows with every new vulnerability. And every new vulnerability that hasn't been patched is an opportunity for an attacker. If exposed vulnerabilities linger unresolved for weeks or months, the possibility of that vulnerability being exploited increases. The larger the attack surface, the more entry points for attackers. So the complete attack surface at an organization includes all the systems, devices, network segments in the organization, and the paths between them where data can flow. Now, traditionally, this includes things like servers, web servers, application servers, database servers, traditional endpoints such as desktops, laptops, mobile devices, networks, network segments, networking devices, routers, switches, load balancers, security devices, both physical and virtual, such as firewalls, intrusion prevention systems, and VP concentrators, and whatever else you happen to have on your network. That's really your traditional attack surface, right? That's the attack surface that we've had throughout history since we sort of first invented computers for the last, 20 or 30 years or so anyway. And what we want to look at now is how is that attack surface expanding, right? The first thing is newer technologies. We're developing and inventing new things, and we're adding these to our corporate networks at a rather accelerated pace, it seems like. In these new technologies, traditional security tools often fail to take them into account, right? Things such as mobile devices and public and private cloud, IoT devices, to include consumer devices, because if you think that your employees are receiving shiny new things for Christmas and birthdays and buying blinky light items, and they're not bringing them into the corporate environment and plugging them into your network or connecting them to your Wi-Fi, well, they are. But in addition to these IoT devices, we also have virtual machines, we have web apps, we have containers. All of these things contribute to your attack surface. And these are all things that an attacker can use to gain access into your network and look for your crown jewels, whatever those may be and wherever they may be. In some cases, these additions to your attack surface are only momentary, right? For example, the average lifespan of a virtual machine is about 2 days, right? And a container is about 2 hours in some environments, or even less, right? I think someone told me, and I don't know, I assume this is accurate, that YouTube spins up a new container to process each and every video that is uploaded to their site. That container lives for like maybe a minute. If you have issues, or security issues, and you're just relying on traditional scanning, you're going to miss those. You're going to miss those virtual machines that are only online for a couple of hours or days, or even weeks in some cases, depending on how often you're doing your scan, right? So, and don't forget about industry-specific technologies as well. For example, medical institutions have a growing number of connected devices. I'm sure we've all heard about the heart implants, and I forget what they're called now, but these are things that are now on your network and are part of your attack surface. Manufacturing organizations have ICS and SCADA systems, industrial control systems and supervisory control and data acquisition systems. These are often connected to the same network as the front office. Despite the fact that common sense and general practice tell you you're not supposed to do that, somebody somewhere has hooked them together. And these all contribute to your attack surface. If you partner with third parties, how much of their network is now also part of your attack surface? There have been several large breaches recently where the attacker didn't come in through the main entrance of the network. They actually came in through a third-party subcontractor who had access to the network. So you need to take all of these things into account when you're looking at your attack surface. All right? And tomorrow there's going to be some new technology that will add to your network that an attacker will target to get into your systems. There's a lot to think about, and getting a handle on it can really be a big issue. So in addition to these new technologies being added that increase your attack surface, we have to look at how those technologies are being configured. Improper configuration of some devices, especially security devices such as, say, firewalls or other tools, may accidentally increase your attack surface. And depending on the tools you use, you might not even be able to detect it. Many assets now have multiple IP addresses or no IP address. Security teams really need to identify and assess all the resources in their environment. And they know IPs do not accurately measure those resources. So if you're just counting IP addresses or just scanning IP addresses, you're not really getting an accurate count or accurate look at what's on your network. Now this can be a major obstacle to traditional methods of managing devices. It's fun, you know, it's really fun to think about like the 400-pound hacker in the basement in New Jersey and think of him trying to take down a Fortune 5,000 company or some government entity. But the reality these days is that most organizations are dealing with a much more serious threat. Yeah, we still have the traditional bad guy who likes to do things for the fun of it, but the motivation these days is more and more about profit and money, and so your stereotypical basement-dwelling bad guy has turned into a professional criminal, organized. And in many cases, the quote cyber criminal isn't an individual lone attacker. They are large teams operating as a criminal enterprise. Whether or not that is the selling of intellectual property, cashing in on ransomware, or whatever method they're using to get monetary remuneration, the professional cyber criminal really needs to be in everyone's threat model. Of course, you know, there are also those attackers who are looking to make some sort of political statement, whether that's through defacing a company's web page, launching a denial of service attack, or deleting the contents of hundreds of workstations. the threat from the hacktivists should not be underestimated, especially those organizations who are in politically sensitive industries. And let's face it, politically sensitive these days can include just about anything, from a power company who has a nuclear generation facility to a cosmetics company who does animal testing, or even food service organizations. I'm sure there is someone out there somewhere who disagrees with whatever it is you do and will look at you as a target. And let's not forget about your competitors. Corporate espionage is a growing concern, and not just internationally. A lot of people think it's oh, you know, Jim Bob down the street who's in the same business as me would never do that. Well, domestic corporate espionage is also a major, very fast-growing concern. There are numerous cases where one company has surreptitiously gained access to a competitor's network for the purposes of gathering customer or some other data. Now, however, the fastest growing threat that impacts just about everyone is the nation state. Whether the adversary is looking to influence an election, steal industrial intellectual property, conduct surveillance on dissidents, conduct reconnaissance for future operation, or they're simply just gathering data for something else. The threat of the highly skilled nation state is here to stay, unfortunately. All right, let's see if we can take, oh, what did I just do? Oh, that's nice. Let's look at a poll. In your compute environment, which of the following assets represents your greatest security concern? Are you concerned with cloud, mobile, containers, IoT, OT or SCADA is sort of like industrial control systems or supervisory control and data acquisition, or some other asset that you feel is a growing, that represents a growing concern to your network. I am going to, while you guys are doing that, I'm going to bring this back up because I clicked the button I wasn't supposed to on my side. So take a second and answer the poll question while I get my slides back together here. There we go. All right. So again, which of the following assets represents your greatest security concern? Cloud, mobile, containers, IoT, SCADA, or other. And that should have been a pop-up on your screen. Just click the answer that best fits your environment. And that is the end of the poll. The poll is closed. And again, I don't have the results. We'll try to get those for you at the end of the webinar here, so that we have some idea of, at least in this audience, of what sort of answers we're looking at. Oh, there we go. I do have some answers. How about that? So this is question number 1. Let me see if I can go back to question number 1 really quick. We'll just do those answers right now. Think about your attack surface. Oh, no. This is not question number 1. This is question number 2. I apologize for these technical difficulties, and we will do these answers. Okay, in your environment, which represents your greatest security concern? Cloud came in at 17%, mobile 19%, containers was 1%, very small, which I find to be interesting because I suspect that a lot of people have containers in their environment and don't know it. IoT 7%. OT SCADA, 6%, other 9%, and not applicable 41%, which is kind of big. Mobile comes in at number 1 at 19%, which I would hopefully at this point, I mean, mobile's been around for a little bit. It's not really new. There's numerous technologies to allow people to get a hold of their mobile devices in their environment, and it would be really great. I think that I'm kind of surprised by that answer. I don't really have an answer for you. As far as containers, is really easy for developers to just start using Docker and other container technologies, and they may or may not be letting the security teams know. So if you don't think you have containers in your environment, you may want to double check. I'm going to guess that that number is going to be higher than the 1% that indicated in this poll. All right, let's keep going on with our next slide. Vulnerability management. So with the growing attack surface, how are you going to manage all these threats and vulnerabilities, right? We talked about different attack surfaces. We talked about threats. How are you going to manage all these things? As you patch and remediate those vulnerabilities, your attack surface is going to shrink, right? The balloon is going to deflate a little bit as you patch, and your surface will shrink a little bit. But the question you really need to ask yourself is, how long does it take to scan your entire infrastructure for vulnerabilities? Right? How long does it take to analyze and prioritize the scan results and produce an accurate, manageable list of fixes? How long does it take for vulnerabilities to make it through your queue until they get patched? All right, if you answer those questions and if it falls into typical ranges, you're probably looking at anywhere from like 2 weeks to 3 months for large organizations, from the start of your scan until the vulnerability is remediated. And as the attack surface gets bigger, as we just looked at, that time is only going to increase, giving an attacker plenty of time and opportunity to cause a breach of your network. All right, even with the advances in technology, most vulnerability management providers still haven't made their products very easy to integrate with other products in the environment. Vulnerability management really needs to be able to easily integrate with broader workflows and business processes to facilitate greater visibility. I mean, as security professionals, we're supposed to be enabling the business. We're not supposed to be the know people. So you want to make sure that your tools help your business to enable the business, right? And further the goals of the business, and not just say, no, you can't do that. And you can do that if you have tools that work with the business that facilitate greater visibility, that facilitate greater control and automation. Right? Integration is still a big challenge for a lot of organizations. Right? Some vendors are adapting their products to the customer's needs, others are not. So it's up to you as the security practitioner to try to seek out those tools to find the ones that really help your business do business. And my button doesn't work. There we go. Visibility. Security teams often have difficulty finding all the assets in their environment. This is because their visibility is incomplete. And as a result, they're constantly being surprised by new resources that they didn't know existed. And even when security teams can see new previously unknown assets, their visibility is often only temporary if they rely on traditional scanning. But if you don't know, traditional scanning is basically looking at every IP address on your network, which, as I mentioned a few slides ago, due to the expanding attack surface, isn't really an effective method any longer. In addition, traditional scanning is not a continuous function, right? It doesn't happen all the time. You can script it and whatnot, but it starts, it goes through the process, and it ends. And as a result, you end up with something called between scan blindness. If your organization is only scanning quarterly or even weekly, it's still a point-in-time view, right? It's what your network looked like when you ran the scan, not just before it, not just after it, and actually not even during it, because your scan is continuously processing along, and once it scans a system, it doesn't go back and look at it to see if it's changed. So it's a point-in-view time, and this leaves knowledge gaps between your scans. Right? Scanning alone seldom finds new technologies that may be present on your network. Defenders must augment scanning with other technologies to fully cover the expanding attack surface. Other technologies include things like active or credentialed scanning. This is where the scanner has credentials to log into the system, or uses a resident agent that lives on an endpoint and can report back to the scanning engine. That way, the scanner can gather information from inside the system, instead of just relying on the information that can be retrieved with just an IP address. And as we've talked about before, IP addresses are not the most reliable things to be relying on. In addition to active scanning, you really need to be doing passive scanning. All right, this is used to augment your traditional scan methods. Right, passive scanning is like looking at your network traffic in real time as it travels across your network. Passive scanning allows you to gather all sorts of data that is missed by both traditional and active scans, right? Because you're seeing the communication as it takes place between different machines, different applications. You can actually see who's talking to who, what's talking to what, and what data they're transmitting back and forth. That's why passive scanning is so important. And of course, in addition to those two, you should also, you have to look at your logs, right? This has been true since as long as I've been in the industry. You have to read your logs. Nobody reads the logs, but you have to do it, right? They're very important. Logs they're a historical record. They won't tell you what's going on right now, but they will tell you things that have already happened. And if you use the logs properly, they can provide real valuable insight into which machines are talking to which other machines, both inside and outside your network. Logs can show you what your users are doing and if they're doing things that they normally do, or if they're doing things that are suddenly outside normal. And logs are great for tracking data flows, both inside and outside your organization. So by utilizing active scanning, passive scanning, and log analysis, you can get great visibility into your network and get a good grasp of your attack surface. All right, so nobody has the resources they need in their security organization. I mean, it's just, nobody does. You don't have the money, you don't have the time, you don't have the people. So as a result of this lack of resources, you really need to prioritize or triage which threats are most important, which ones are going to cause you the most damage. And when I say you, I mean you and your environment, not which ones have the highest CVE score, because that may not necessarily be critical to you, right? So you need to know what to fix first, right? This is an area that vulnerability management as an industry has struggled with, right? Does a CVE score of an 8.6 always trump a score of 4.5? Well, maybe not if the vulnerability allows RCE, remote code execution, and is on a production server that your crown jewels live on, right? As such, prioritization of threats is unique to each organization. This makes it extremely difficult to create action items for your limited people to go and fix without the critical context. Despite this, prioritization is the management in vulnerability management. All right, I'm going to say that again. Despite the difficulty that we have in ranking vulnerabilities and prioritizing and triaging those vulnerabilities, prioritization is the management in vulnerability management. Because without that, all you really have is a big long list of vulnerabilities. You're not managing anything. You really need to know what to fix first. All right, so with the growing attack surface and growing threats, how do you really effectively manage all this? All these threats and vulnerabilities? Okay, in the beginning, cloud-based security products and the cloud in general seem to be a high-risk endeavor, right? You're going to trust somebody else with all your stuff. Why should you trust someone else to secure your data? Concerns about the control and the handling of information prompted organizations to only move small amounts of data and processing to the cloud. But over time, it's really become clear that the cloud not only offers significant price and performance advantages, but many cloud-specific data security concerns were either overstated or have been addressed. In addition, with these challenges of finding and funding high-quality security personnel, many organizations are shifting their resources toward cloud-based security products. So, I mean, if you can't, we all know there's a big talent shortage in the industry. There just aren't enough people to go around. So if you can't find the security people to secure your organization, use somebody else's. Pay them to do it for you. That's what cloud is all about. Let them have all the security experts in-house and able to manage the security concerns while you go about running your business. Right? The proliferation of new and short-lived assets such as containers and virtual machines and cloud instances, these have increased the risk an organization to an unknown, unprotected asset to become compromised and can contribute to a data breach. Tools that don't communicate or interoperate with each other can lead to security risks being missed. In addition, security professionals need to switch between multiple tools quickly. They grow frustrated. I know I hate having to switch window frames, looking at my different tools, trying to figure out what's going on in my network. What you need is like a single pane of glass that you can look at and say, boom, I know everything that's going on all at once. And you can do that with some of the cloud-based solutions that are out there today, right? Because they come with pre-built integrations and the ability to quickly build new integrations. Or if they don't, that's what you should be looking for. You want them to have a well-documented API that allows your security professionals to improve their overall visibility and increase their efficiency. All right, if you're a small organization and you lack internal security resources or the capital, you can reduce your expenditures by leveraging a shared cloud infrastructure for storage and processing. Old models of static assets counts, those are in the past. The ease and availability of virtual machines and containers, it's important that you have the ability to flex capacity higher and lower in real time. And you can do that with cloud-based resources. So, in conclusion, let me advance my slides properly. Your attack surface is expanding. All right, there's no two ways around it. Technology marches onward. You're having more technologies in your environment. Your surface is expanding. You have mobile devices. You have public and private cloud. You have IoT devices, virtual machines, web apps, containers. All of these things contribute to your attack surface. These new technologies must fit into your overall security plan. The only way to help reduce this threat is to quickly and effectively manage the vulnerabilities in those systems. New and changing threats should play a significant role in that plan. Vulnerability management really needs to be able to easily integrate with broader workflows and business processes. Remember, security is supposed to be an enabler of business, and the only way to do that is to integrate with the rest of the business. Traditional scanning, or even active scanning, is no longer enough to give you visibility into your entire network. Passive scanning and log analysis are key to give you continuous, real-time view into all activity on your network. And again, prioritization, prioritization, prioritization. That's the key. It's not only to effectively manage your potentially limited resources, but also to put the management into vulnerability management. And after all that, leverage the cloud. Do not fear the cloud. Cloud-based resources can really be a force multiplier for optimizing the few resources that you have. All right, that's pretty much all I have for today. I wanted to share with you a few resources that you can use. We have a blog, an ebook, two blogs, an ebook, and a free eval. I invite you all to try out Tenable IO, our vulnerability management solution. It comes with a 60-day free trial. And I think one of the cool things about this free trial is that if you decide to go ahead and implement Tenable IO into your environment, you don't have to start over. You can continue on. We just turn your free trial into an active subscription, and all the data that your Tenable IO free trial has collected stays with you. So you don't lose that. So I think that's really a big benefit there. So I encourage you to give that a shot. And it's free, right? So what do you got to lose? And read the two blogs that we have and check out the ebook, 10 Steps for Achieving Effective Vulnerability Management. Those links are there. I believe those links will be included in a follow-up email to you after this webinar. And we will go to the Q&A. Let me see if I can find where the questions are.
Chris, thank you so much. This is Jessica with the Multi-State ISAC. Great presentation. I think it definitely, a lot of people relate to this, and we do have a couple questions that have come in. I do have a couple questions about the slides and the recording. As Chris mentioned, we will be following up with a follow-up email that will include the links that Chris just spoke about on the previous slide, as well as a link to the PDF slide deck that Chris presented today. And we can also send out the webcast recording as well. So that's that. And a couple questions that have come in are about the containers that you mentioned earlier in the presentation, Chris. Some folks are wondering, what are some common containers that businesses overlook?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Basically, a container is sort of, think of it sort of like a virtual machine, but smaller and faster and quicker to use. A virtual machine is basically an entire operating system as well as applications running on shared hardware, right? A container is a subset of an operating system. It only includes the bits and pieces that it actually needs, as well as the application or the small bits of code that it needs to run. The advantage of a container is it can run just about anywhere and is not limited by the physical hardware or the operating system that the virtual machine needs to run on. The issue security-wise comes in is that when a developer builds a container, they tend to do so with sort of a stock image, if you will. And I know I'm mixing my metaphors here, but I believe that kind of works if you think of it that way. And so if there's a security vulnerability in that stock image, if you will, then it's going to propagate through all of the containers that are created with it. Once a container is deployed, it's almost impossible to fix that security problem. Like, why bother? Because it's only going to be around for a couple of hours, maybe a day or two at most, and people just destroy it and create a new one. So you need to be able to, when you're looking for vulnerabilities in containers, you need to be able to scan the registry and basically the image that creates the containers and fix the problems there, so that when your developers do create a new container, it doesn't have those vulnerabilities in it. Now, just because a container is short-lived doesn't mean that an attacker can't take advantage of it, because once they realize that there's a vulnerability in your containers, they'll just wait for the next one to come around and exploit the vulnerability and then use that as the jumping-off point to other parts of your network. So I hope I answered the question properly. Do we have any other questions, Jessica?
We do, and we actually had a couple questions about the container topic, so I'm glad you went into more detail about that, just about what it was. And are you able to give an example of what a container is, or did you already do that?
I can give you a brand name, Docker. Docker is a container platform that a lot of people use. It's probably one of the most popular ones right now. And so there are others, and there's entire infrastructure being built around containers, as well as services and whatnot. So it's fairly recent too. It's really taking off in the last few years. Probably not even that much. The last few months, it's really gotten hot. But it's going to get hotter because developers like it. Like I said, YouTube does it for every single video, as far as I know. So that's a lot amount of containers that all need scanning. And if you're using them in your environment, and like I said, that's why I was surprised at that 1% answer earlier in one of the poll questions, that only 1% saw containers as being a threat to their network. I suspect that your developers are probably using containers and not telling you, in which case you may want to go have a talk with them and find out, or scan for them on your network if you have a technology that can do that.
Perfect.
Yep.
We do have a couple other questions coming in here, so everyone on the line, feel free to send those in. We do have some time to answer Q&A. Getting away from the containers a little bit, in your opinion, how much is application deployed in AWS environment vulnerable to attacks?
Oh, that's a good question. I am not an AWS expert. For those that don't know, that's Amazon Web Services. How vulnerable are they to attack? I know there are a lot of smart people that work at Amazon. I drink beer with them on a regular basis. How vulnerable are they? I don't know if I can answer that. I haven't done a security assessment of their system. Considering the types of companies that use and rely on AWS, including Tenable, I'm going to feel that they are fairly secure. But again, I don't have any numbers to back that up. I'm sorry. Next question.
No, that's okay. Next question, let's see. What would you say is the difference between Security Center and Tenable IO that you mentioned earlier?
Another good question. Tenable IO is our fully cloud-based product that we have basically spent the last 2 years developing. and it will integrate our Tenable IO container security, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway, Tenable IO web application scanning, which is a new product that's coming out shortly. So it's our new platform to add on new technologies to. Right? It doesn't take away from Security Center. It allows us to move into the future and add stuff to it that our customers are asking for. And the fact that it's entirely cloud-based gives us that flexibility to move with the future as the future moves and add those new technologies. Next question.
All right. This is a pretty good question. I'm not sure that we touched on this yet. Do you have any tips on how to convey the importance of vulnerability management to executives, the executive team, and why an investment should be made?
Metrics. I know that's kind of a fancy word for graphs and charts and whatnot and numbers, but basically that's what it is. It's hard to sell security, and that's what you're doing when you're talking to your board members is you're trying to sell them security, and it's difficult to sort of show them the risk that's involved. And I think the way to do that is to put it into business terms or try to speak their language, right? Your C-level officers are used to mitigating risk and accepting risk, right? They understand that they can't have a perfect world and that there's a, so for example, there's a risk that their building might burn down. So what do? They buy insurance. Well, there's still a risk to the company that they may lose a physical space to operate out of. So does the company then has to decide whether or not that risk is worth having a second building standing by that they can move into if they need to, right? So it's up to your C-level officers to realize the risk from cyber and what that means to the company and how likely that is to happen, and then take appropriate action. There are some organizations that no matter how well you describe the risk to them are not going to deem that the risk is important enough to devote resources to. I've been in organizations like that, and as a security person, it's not fun. All you can do really is keep banging your drum and try to say, look, we have a serious problem here. We need to devote more resources to this. Look what I did. And that's something else you can do too. Say, look what I did with the few resources that you did give me. I reduced our vulnerability, number of unpatched vulnerabilities by 40% in the last 6 months. Or, you know, we patched this number of, or we prevented this number of things from happening. We did education of our employees and reduced our phishing attempts by 17%, right? Try to come up with numbers and metrics that apply to your organization are important to your organization. And those numbers will hopefully convince your C-level officers that they need to invest more resources into the security organization. Next question.
Perfect. Next question. Do you feel that key management is becoming more of a priority with cloud and container services?
Key management. I'll assume you mean like encryption key management and whatnot, SSH key management. Yeah, of course it is. It's important because as you deal with these distributed services, your keys to them, your encryption keys, your passwords, whatever it is you use to get into them, is going to become more and more important, obviously, yeah. So management of those keys becomes more important. And there are various techniques you can use, various applications you can use to do that management for you. I'm not really an expert in key management, so I don't want to talk too much about it, but yes, it's becoming more important.
Okay, excellent. Let's see, kind of a broader question here, and then we do have a couple more coming in. Broader question, how can we quantify the attack surface?
Yeah, that's quantifying the attack surface is challenging, as I've just discussed here. One way to do that is to try to, again, get some metrics around your environment. Look at how many exploitable vulnerabilities there are in your environment. Right? You should hopefully have a scanning solution in place that will allow you to look at how many vulnerabilities you have, how fast you're patching them. So you can say that your average time to patch a vulnerability has been reduced from 3 weeks to 1 week or something, you know, whatever it is in your environment and how fast you're doing that. Or you have, you know, you reduce the number of critical vulnerabilities on key systems by 17% over the last 2 months. Those are probably some of the better ways that you can quantify your attack surface, is by looking at your exploitable vulnerabilities, the number of actual systems you have on your network, what your configuration is of that network, where your firewalls are, where your network segments are, and that sort of thing. So yeah, next question.
Okay, looks like we have 2 more. In your opinion, how important is PKI on your internal network?
Public key infrastructure. That's going to depend on your environment, really. I know some environments where PKI is really important, and other environments where it's not that big a deal. And it's going to be up to each individual security organizations to try to make that determination based on their own threat model and threat environment. And you may find that you have different parts of your network require different levels of PKI, right? So the parts of the network that your R&D department in, for example, requires a higher level than the department that your HR department is in. But again, it depends on your threat model and your environment. Next question.
Perfect. Now, without getting too specific, and I'm not sure if you're able to, but someone asked, what tools are most useful or popular for passive scanning?
Well, I know of one tool that's really popular, at least with the people that I hang out with. It's part of Tenable IO, our passive vulnerability scanner. I don't want to make this into a product pitch. I'm sure there are other products out there that can do passive scanning. I am most familiar with our PVS product, and if you're interested in that, answer the email that you'll get in another day or so, and respond, or send me an email directly, and I'll get you in contact with the right people. Next question.
All right, I think this is our last one. How would you respond to a customer who asked you to investigate and report back to them on the value of data?
Investigate and report back to them on the value of data.
A secondary question to that is, how do you value data in a corporation? What value does corporate data have in the dark web, for example?
So yeah, you know, a lot of these questions are unfortunately very organizationally specific. So for some, I worked at one company where the crown jewels of the company, the absolute most protected data that we had, regardless of anything else that we were working on, was the CEO's Rolodex, basically. It was his contact list in his email client. Was our most protected asset in the entire company. All of our reports and everything else that we produced was secondary to that one bit of proprietary data. And of course, my phone's going to ring while I'm on the webinar. So, but that's going to vary from one organization to the next, right? Other organizations, it's going to be their customer data. That's going to be the proprietary. Other organizations, it's going to be the sales data or their R&D data. So different organizations have different important data. And so this really becomes the key when you're looking at securing your network. You need to identify what that data is. What's the most important thing? What are the crown jewels? What are you going to protect the most, right? And what if the company loses that data, the company's done, right? It's over. It's a company-ending event if you lose that data. So that is really, that can be a challenge in some organizations. Well, how do we identify what is most important to us as a company? And some companies don't know that, and it can take a really long, involved process to figure that out. So again, I hate to say it's you know, organizationally specific, but each organization has different priorities and different values that they value their data, and so you need to figure out what that is so that you can protect it. Next question. If that was the last one, I think, right?
It was, but we kind of have you might have already gone through this, but kind of piggybacking off of one of the other questions.
Okay.
Did you already go through how does passive scanning work? Somebody asked that question.
I don't know if I did, but I think I did, but I'll do it again. Passive scanning, basically it's a network sniffer, right? it sits on your wire or your Wi-Fi or whatever, and it looks at all the packets, each individual packet that goes through your network. So it knows which machine is communicating to which other machine. It knows when it communicates. It knows who's doing the communication, in other words, who's logged into that system. It knows, as long as it's not encrypted, what's in the data, right? So this can allow you to detect things like, let's say, malware. If a machine gets infected and it tries to phone home, your PVS, your passive scanner system, will detect this bad IP address that it's communicating to in Russia and be like, hey, that's not normal. We should investigate that, and hopefully it will raise a flag and open a ticket, and somebody will look at that system and say, oh, yeah, this machine was communicating to some other machine in Russia because it was infected with malware. All right. Your passive scanning will also tell you that large amounts of data are leaving your network. Well, we know that that Jim Bob, who uses machine 123, he never communicates any data anywhere except to the HR server. That's the only thing he ever does because he works in HR, and he communicates from his machine to the server machine, and that's it. And then suddenly we notice that Jim Bob at machine 123 is sending 10 gigabytes of data out to Dropbox or some other place. Like, what's going on there, right? So hopefully that raises a flag, opens a ticket, somebody can investigate and figure it out. So by looking at your data passively like that, you can determine all sorts of stuff, like those things that are going on. And some of those things are security things, and some of those things are not. But without the passive scanning, you won't find them. The other advantage to passive scanning, at least when it comes to inventory, is that it will detect a machine on your network as soon as it pops up, right? So if you're just doing your active scans and you're scanning your IP addresses, you don't see machines that are turned off. You don't see machines that are only on for an hour a day in the morning. You don't see mobile devices that only pop in, once a week or whatever. But if you have passive scanning going on, you do see those things. You see those new MAC addresses pop up in the ARP tables. You do see new traffic patterns and new users. If you have a user that has been terminated and their account credentials were for some reason not revoked or suddenly become active again, you can see those with a passive scanner, right? Because you'll see those names fly across the network, and hopefully that'll raise a flag and open a ticket, and someone will investigate. So that's kind of how passive scanning works. And I think it's a major component to an overall security strategy. You really need to have your active and credentialed scans. You need to have your passive scanning, and you need to have your log analysis. Without those, it's kind of like the three legs of a stool. Without one of them, you're missing part of the picture. You're not going to see the overall security picture of your landscape. And I think that's enough rambling from me. So Jessica, I guess I'll turn it back over to you. And I thank everybody for attending.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. This was a great presentation. Like I said, I think a lot of people related to it, and we got some great questions. If we did not answer your questions, please feel free to reach out to us. info@msisac.org is always a good place to send a note to, and if we don't have the answers, we can certainly reach out to Chris and forward those questions along to get those answered for you. A couple more questions came in about the recording and the slide deck, so we will be following up after this live event within the next couple days with a follow-up email that includes some links that Chris had in his presentation, as well as a link to the PDF slide deck and the webcast recording, so feel free to stay tuned for that. With that, thank you so much to everyone for joining on today's MSISAC National Webcast. Quick reminder that our next national webcast will take place in June of 2017, so stay tuned for more information on that. As I mentioned, today's session will be available both in the follow-up email as well as on the MSISAC website within a couple days of the live event, so feel free to check that out. Again, any other questions, feel free to reach out to us at the MSISAC, and we're happy to help. And thank you to everyone for joining. Have a great afternoon. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.